Good evening.
Evening.
So this will be our fourth and final segment on the Chida. Zecher Tzadik Kodesh Levracha Schuso Yogein Aleinu V'Nomar Amen. And the topic is celebrating the depth and intensity of human emotion. Sometimes we have a warped view that a gadol is someone who doesn't really have intense or vibrant emotions, which is not true. It is true that to achieve greatness, part of that process is getting to a place in life where I have more control over the emotional world within me. And I can direct those emotions and draw from that wellspring and bring out the different midos, how and when it's called for. But there's no diminishing of human emotion. To the contrary, the greater a person becomes, often the more emotional depth he or she has. The idea of kol hagodol mechavero yitzro godol himenu. The greater you are, so the more powerful yetzer you have, is based on this notion that the more I'm able to expand my horizons and develop myself and bring out the neshama, that godly spirit within me, the more in touch I am with those infinite well springs of emotion. The Chida, we see in many places throughout his diary, was not afraid to express emotion, not afraid to feel emotion. He had a very unique love for humanity. And it's interesting, if you look at the commentary of his great-grandfather we spoke about last week, the Chesed Lavram, who was a master Mekubal, he has an incredible Perush in Pirkei Avos. And he explains when the Mishnah tells us that we should emulate Aaron HaKohen, we should become disciples of Aaron, Ohev Sholom Verodev Sholom, Ohev Es HaBrios U'Makarvan LaTorah. We should love peace, we should pursue peace. Ohev Es HaBrios, we should love humanity, U'Makarvan LaTorah, and bring them close to Torah. He explains Rav Ramu Zulai, the great-grandfather of the Chida. He says the idea of Ohev Es HaBrios, that word brios is mashma, doesn't make a difference who you are. Tzadikim ozulosam, if you're righteous, if you're not at all a holy or refined person, it makes no difference. Because you're a bria, because you're a creation of a Kadosh Baruch Hu, there's a love that I have for you. Ohev Es HaBrios U'Makarvan LaTorah explains, the Chesed Lavram, those are not two separate ideas. We don't have a mandate to love people, and we also have an obligation to try to bring them close to Torah, but the way it works is that through my love, through my genuine care and appreciation for who you are, you're a nivra, you're a creation of a Kadosh Baruch Hu, Ubezeh mekarven LaTorah. This will almost automatically bring them close to Torah, even if presently they're far removed from it. He does say, almost parenthetically, he says, maybe also there's an allusion here in how to bring people closer to Torah. Mekarvan LaTorah means to bring them closer to Torah. Not to make the mistake, says the Chesed Lavram, not to make the mistake that I have to lower my own values or compromise in what I feel is the right thing to try to be more engaged and more connected. And through me watering things down, that way you'll be more able to relate to me and I could bring you in. To the contrary, I'm not really gaining much by lowering my standards. If anything, I'm putting down my shield to the point that I could be influenced by this culture, by this way of life. Mekarvan LaTorah is saying, you love people, you care for them, you have a respect for them, U'Makarvan LaTorah, and automatically they're going to want to come closer to you because you represent Torah. But don't bring yourself down to bring them up. inspire them through your love to bring them up closer to Hashem Yisborach. The Chida had this Avas Habrios, and we see that there is this emotional connection to people from all different backgrounds, to the point where he would enjoy having conversations with anybody, as long as it was something productive and it was meaningful and he was getting to know you and expanding his horizons and his own appreciation of the world and Tzelem Elokim. That was something the Chida himself would cherish. In the diary, he speaks about a time that he was on this horrific boat ride, traveling for way too long in very rough, turbulent waters. Getting on the boat, he wasn't sure he had enough money. He was traveling back to Livorno in Italy to be reunited with his family after a long time apart in one of his many travels. And he writes, "I didn't think I had enough money to get me home, and although my daughter and my son-in-law, Baruch Hashem, they're well off, I didn't want to come in empty-handed. The father-in-law coming in after a long journey and not having any money, that would be awkward, so I borrowed some cash. I get on this boat, and the captain, he describes in the most glowing of terms. He was a Rosha Godol, Geya Vishota, a wicked person, arrogant and foolish. And for some reason, he didn't like me from the very beginning, and he told all the sailors on the boat not to converse with me. They were not allowed to speak with me. And whenever I needed something for basic survival, I wouldn't get it. I would have to ask the captain. And on Friday, when I was preparing for Shabbos, making 2 tavshilin, a very meager form of trying to have sudas on Shabbos, the captain came to me and he yelled, "Who do you think you are? You're a prince? You're some kind of chashuv person that you're making yourself all of this food and using up water as if you were on dry land?" Now in reality, says the Chida, when I came on the ship, I brought with me barrels of water. And you know who consumed all of that water? All of the sailors and other people here. So he writes, what I had to do is I had to eat less than a shear for Birchas Hamazon, because I didn't have enough water to wash my hands before eating bread, so I didn't want to have the shear. We know there's a debate in halacha, how much bread do you have to eat to require washing beforehand, how much bread do you have to eat to require washing with the bracha. He doesn't get into the details, but he made sure to eat only a small amount of bread so he wouldn't have an obligation of the Tilas Yadayim. He also brought with him some expensive tobacco and wine to give to the captain, knowing that he might not be his friend, and this might be a way of winning him over. However, he writes in his disappointment, it did absolutely nothing. Kol zeh nenu shavalo, it was worthless to him, and he hated me from the beginning of the journey until the end of the journey. What was most painful was on Shabbos, though. The fact that he couldn't eat that much during the week, he was able to live with it and understand and accept this was my circumstance. But on Shabbos, not to be able to have the amount for a Suda of Shabbos, that really, really caused me pain. Now, I didn't know what to do because I'm on this boat with these sailors who wouldn't speak to me. Now, if we were to pause before reading the rest of this paragraph, we would say, if you're a Godol Hador, why do you care if these guys are schmoozing with you? If anything, you would probably just want your peace and quiet and not to be disturbed. If we picture the Gedolim that we're familiar with, I don't think, or at least I would not have thought, that a personality like Reb Chaim Kanievsky would be disturbed by the fact that these shkotzim are not talking with me. Baruch Hashem, leave me alone, I'll do my own thing. But the Chida writes, it was so hard not to have conversation. And I even gave them some shecher, some beer, and some fruit, and other things to try to encourage them to talk to me. And only in private, in secret, when the captain wasn't looking, then they would say a few words here and there, but they would explain that they're afraid of the captain. And that's why generally they're keeping his instructions. What I found incredible about this particular insight is when he concludes this paragraph, he creates a summary of all the difficulties that he went through during this journey. And he lists 5 different things. So for example, he speaks about the fact that they were in a very fragile boat that any moment could have capsized. And therefore, you were not only seasick, you were living with an ongoing sense of fear that you might die any moment. Not a pleasant thing. Then he also mentions the fact that there was a hole on the bottom of the boat where water kept on going inside, and all of the sailors, including himself, had to take turns in making sure to bucket out the water. There were storms, there was danger, and then he lists, though, and this is the first thing, when he summarizes all of the tsar that he went through, the first thing he mentions is, Shelo hayu mi ledaber. I had no one to speak to. He had to live in darkness during this journey of many weeks. He had to be in cramped quarters, and he was afraid of his life. But the top of his list was, I wasn't able to converse, I wasn't able to connect with other human beings, and that was very distressing. He says, finally, there were moments, though, that I was able to learn. And here again we get this glimpse into the hasmada, the ongoing diligence of the Chida in all situations, wherever he found himself. B'chol tsari, with all of my pain, hayisi lomed lefia eis, I was able to learn at certain times. And he writes, what did I learn? I went through the entire Sefer Parshas Derachim of the Mishnah Lamelech. Not an easy Sefer to go through, but I went through that entire Sefer, and I wrote my own chidushim and insights, pshatim ve'inyanim, and I wrote drushes from Parshas Vayikra through Parshas Emor. Tisha B'Av was a disaster. Tisha B'Av was very, very hard. V'hatainis hayalit tzara gedola ma'od, being able to fast on that Tisha B'Av caused a lot of pain. Someone like the Chida, there's an avas habrios, there's a desire, there's a humanity, where although I'm a Malach Hashem, and I'm learning Parshas Derachim and writing drushes from Parshas Vayikra through Parshas Emor, as I'm seasick and afraid that I might not live another moment, but I also enjoy and need the company of others. We find a few places where the relationships we have with others are somewhat of a springboard in our relationship with Hashem. And this is a concept that's well known, but I think it's also misunderstood. I want to share with you a couple of the examples, explain the misunderstanding, and then try to get a clearer picture of how this works. One famous example is when Yaakov reunites with Yosef, and the pasuk says, "V'yipol al tzavara v'yev," that Yaakov and Yosef embraced, and Yosef fell on his father's neck and he cried. And Rashi quotes the Chazal. It only says that Yosef was crying, doesn't mention that Yaakov was crying. That's because Shehayakara Shema, because Yaakov was saying the Shema. So the Maral, troubled by why is Yaakov Avinu saying Shema at this particular moment, assuming that it was already Zman Kriya Shema from before, we assume he said it when he davened Shachris. Or if it's Sof Zman Kriya Shema and for some reason he was waiting until now, so then Yosef should be saying it also. Why was he saying Shema right now? So says the Maral, Yaakov was having one of the most intense moments of his life. He was seeing now for the first time, after decades, his son, who was not just alive, but he was Melech. He was in total control of Mitzrayim, and many explain as well, the Orach Chaim and others, that not only was he influential and healthy and powerful, but Yaakov saw that he was still a tzaddik. He was somehow able to maintain and evolve in his righteousness. So, bo belibo avoso v'yirasa shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu, this powerful love and yira infused within the neshama of Yaakov, that he felt so grateful towards Hashem. And the way of the Hasidim is that when you go through something that's inspiring, so I want to connect more with the Kadosh Baruch Hu. I want to express my gratitude. And therefore there's no better way of doing that than using this moment to say, Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. Even though I was in so much pain for so many years, I see how you were mamish orchestrating this the entire time. And therefore, I love you, and I'm makir tov. I recognize that it's all you. Ein non milvado. So he was saying Shema at that moment when he was embracing Yosef. Let me ask you a question. How did Yosef feel about that? Yosef realized his father was saying Shema. Did that diminish or take away from the moment? Did Yosef feel that maybe my father, he's not present because, well, he's so inspired, so now he's saying Shema, but isn't that taking him away from me? Now we could ask the same question earlier on when Yosef first reveals himself to his brothers, and we have the pasuk speaking about the embrace between Yosef and Binyamin. And there it's clear that they were both crying on each other. But Rashi quotes the Chazal that says that Yosef, what was he crying about? Al shnei mikdosho shasidan lios bechelko shel Binyamin. Yosef was thinking about the Bayis Rishon and the Bayis Sheni that would be in the future in the portion of Binyamin. And he was crying over their churban, their destruction. And Binyamin was crying over Mishkan Shiloh. That would be in the future in the chelik of Yosef. And he was crying over the dismantling of Mishkan Shiloh. Did Yosef feel that Binyamin wasn't fully in the moment because he was also focused on Mishkan Shiloh? Did Binyamin feel that Yosef wasn't fully present because he knew that Yosef was also focused on the Mikdash Rishon, Mikdash Sheni? Interesting question. The answer to both is a resounding chas v'sholom. When Yaakov is saying Kriya Shema, it's not diverting or distracting him from his relationship with his son. That would not be the Ratzon HaBorei. Hashem would not be receiving nachas at this juncture if Yaakov was not paying full attention and giving his son the love and the moment that he deserved. Yosef felt an added sense of connection and devekus with his father as his father was saying Kriya Shema. Because the love I have for you, and this is where it's so important and sometimes misunderstood, our relationship is not a springboard for my relationship with Hashem, where we get close and somehow that elevates me to be closer with God, and then as I get closer with God, I somehow remove myself or distance myself from you. Rather, the closer we become, husband and wife, parent and child, the closer that relationship is, and it grows and it flourishes, at the same time and through this relationship, I am coming closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The emotions that I have for you don't take me away from God. They make me more godly. When it's an ava she'ein toli b'davar, when it's a real, genuine, true love. Yaakov felt closer, Yosef felt closer to his father as Yaakov was saying Kriya Shema. It wasn't taking him away from Yosef, it was maximizing and bringing that connection closer to each other. The fact that Yosef was able to have this nevuah of the Batei Mikdash, and Binyamin was able to have the nevuah of Shiloh, and they were thinking about Klal Yisrael as they were thinking about each other, it wasn't taking away from the moment, it was adding to the intensity of the moment. Human emotions are something that we don't try to rise above to become more robotic. Human emotions are there to elevate ourselves to become more godly. This is true in situations of joy and excitement, and it's also true in situations of real tsar, of real pain and disconnect. There's an incredible Gemara in Sanhedrin that speaks about Rabbi Gamliel. It's elaborating on a pasuk in Eicha, B'cho tivka b'layla, that you cry during the night. Says the Gemara in Sanhedrin, Kuf Dalid, that when one cries during the night, so then because there's not that much other sounds around, other people hear the cry and they might be mishtatef, they might join in. Maisa be'isha achas. There was a mother living in the same neighborhood as Rabbi Gamliel, where tragically her son passed away, v'haisa bocha lav b'layla, and she would be up during the night crying for him. Shama Rabbi Gamliel kola, Rabbi Gamliel heard her call, u'bocha kenegda, so he chose to cry with her. Ad shenoshu risei einav, to the point where he was crying so intensely, his eyelashes were falling out. And when his Talmidim saw him the next day and they felt that if he keeps on doing this, it's not going to be healthy for him, they moved him out of that shchuna so he wouldn't experience that level of ongoing pain. What the Gemara doesn't say, though, is what was actually going through the mind of Rebbe Gamliel as he was crying together with this mother. The Medrash Rabbah does. The Medrash in Eicha explains, it adds just one phrase. It tells over the same exact story, but it elaborates. V'haya Rebbe Gamliel shomeas kola. Rebbe Gamliel heard her cry. V'haya nizkar churban beis hamikdash. And he brought into his mind the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash, v'haya bocha ima, and he was crying together with her, ad shenashu risa einav, until his eyelashes fell out. Reading this Medrash Rabbah, which is really elaborating on what the Gemara says, reading it superficially, one might say, he was tapping into her emotion, but almost exploiting her pain. To get him emotional to cry about something more important than her personal loss. But you see, when reading the Medrash Rabbah, it's true that he was using that kol to have a real avelus for the Churban, to have a sense of mourning for the lack of the Shekhinah in this world. But it says, Nizkor Churban Beis HaMikdash v'haya bocha ima. Bocha ima is that he was crying with her. I'm not exploiting your emotion that I could focus on something bigger and more national and universal. I'm feeling your pain. I'm being mishtatef, I'm partnering in this suffering. And through this emotional connection that I have for your personal loss, I'm able to also tap into a national loss. Human emotion is not something that takes us away from greatness, but when we have the ability to channel and uplift ourselves through tapping in to real hargasha, that's how we become great people. The Chida speaks about this in his own life. In one of the most very personal and sad passages in the diary of the Chida, he speaks about getting the news that his wife passes away. He was not there, and he receives the letter more than 30 days after her passing. This is on the top of page 5, number 7. It was after Havdalah, I went into my room and I opened the letter, and I saw, tragically, Be'isha, Eishis Neurim, the wife of my youth, HaChasida, who was so righteous. She was a Balas Seichel, Yirash Hashem, Balas Tzedakos, Hatzenua, Mechemed Einai. She was the jewel of my eyes. Rachel, I saw that she passed away. V'olam chashech ba'di, and my world was dark. However, I quickly realized that I can't tell anybody what happened. Right? This is in one of the many passages where he is in Tunisia, and it's clear the type of people in Tunisia at the time were very, very difficult, overwhelming personalities. So I realized right away I couldn't say anything to anybody around me, because they're oduk ma'od bi, they're very attached to me, they're clinging to me, right? They had this unhealthy awe of the Chida, and they were so pushy and grub a mention, so they would make me marry someone right away. I knew that there would be a dictate from the king, because they would want me to stay there and become a native of the land. So he says, Baruch Hashem, which is also an amazing insight that even as he's recording his deepest pain, but I see the Chaste Hashem and allowing me to make sure not to share this with anyone else. So what did I do? I grabbed the candle, v'halachti lebeis knesses, and I went to the shul where no one was. V'shom b'chisi kasha, and there I cried for an hour. And then when I went back to my room, a few of my close friends, Reb Moshe, Reb Yehuda, he names a few of them, I was able to share with them the terrible news that I received. Vayisi betzari mohem ad chatzos, and I was in pain together with them until midnight. And then when they left, Yishafti al karka lomer tikun chatzos, I then sat on the ground to say Tikkun Chatzos, mourning over Yerushalayim. I took off my shoes, as is the halacha of a Shmuah Rechoka. Shmuah Rechoka is when a person hears about the passing of one of the 7 relatives he's chayiv to observe Avelus for, but he hears about it more than 30 days after their passing. But I had to keep everything quiet, to the point where I was ill from this Shmuah Ra. And every night I would do this. Every night I would go to the Beis Knesses, and I would cry, and I would sit on the floor, and I would say Tikkun Chatzos. And then I would give tzedakah for her neshama. But it was so incredibly challenging that I was doing this alone. Shekamat haisi yechidah bedor. She was literally unique in the generation, at least according to my perception, in her wisdom, in her dignity, in her seichel, v'chein v'yofi v'tznius gadol, in her chein and her beauty and her tznius gadol. And then he says an amazing line, v'zeh gorem li shechlesi b'choli hashchora. This caused me to fall into a depression. B'choli hashchara. Shelo hayisi yochol ha'asiyach. Because I wasn't able to share my burden with others, because I had to keep it a secret. And I didn't trust anyone. Lo himanti lahagi l'shum adam vayisi yomim rabim b'tzar zeh. I went a long time in this shchora mora, in this state of depression. And even when I was finally able to board the boat, going back to Livorno, to be reunited with the rest of my family and my children in Italy, I still didn't feel comfortable telling anyone on the boat that my wife passed away, and even my good friend and comrade, Rabbi Avram, I didn't want to say anything because maybe the boat would break and we'd have to go back to Tunisia and word would spread. It wasn't until we made it safely back to Livorno, there I was able to share the news with Rabbi Avram and have some level of comfort from those who loved me and those who supported me. The Chida, like Rabbi Gamliel, he didn't try to push away or mitigate the pain. He was feeling the pain b'chol tokif in all of its intensity. And he was able, he still describes himself as falling into a depression. And what that looks like for the Chida is hard to know. But he's clearly telling us that he was not the same man because he wasn't able to share that tsar with others. But you're the Gadol Hador, you don't have to do that. You don't need human interaction. You could just get back to the Kitsosa Choshen and learn. A human being is a human being. And a great human being has greater emotion. The hadracha that the Chida gives in regards to all areas of life, and we find this through many of his svarim, is that everything we do, it should be done with thoughtfulness, and it should be done with all of one's heart. He writes when it comes to raising children, Yishtadel ma'od legadel bonav al haTorah v'al avoda. We should try with all of the hishtadlus to raise our children in Torah and avodas Hashem, and they should have yiras shamayim and midos tovos. Ubezet tzarich chachma gedola. But he writes in the Mora Be'etzva, this requires a lot of chachma. Don't think you could just be machanech your children for Torah and avoda and yiras shamayim. You have to really use your seichel and your leiv. V'yeshel hisbonein be'inyan zeh harbe. It requires conversations. It requires rethinking my premise. It requires strategizing. Uleredis la'omke v'chadre betin banov. And this is going back to the 1700s, where this was not necessarily the assumed approach for education. But the Chida says you have to get deep into your child to know who they are and what they need, because every single child needs something different. But beyond all the hishtadlus and beyond all of the hisbonenus and the contemplation and the strategizing, we have to dive into Hashem bebechia with tears, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu should give us siyata d'shmaya, shekol zera zera kodesh. One last point, which I think really flows from this avas habrios, this love and this faith in humanity. He quotes in the Pesach Enayim, his commentary to Pirkei Avos, he quotes from Chaim Vital. We mentioned last week the incredible dream that he had as he was learning one of the Kabbalistic Svarim of Reb Chaim Vital. Reb Chaim Vital came to him in a dream and he was able to ask him questions, and he answered the Chida, and then he also gave the Chida a glass of wine. So here he quotes Reb Chaim Vital, who's addressing the following question: how is it possible that we should have any hope that somehow we'll be zoche to geula? And this is a famous question the Chafetz Chaim speaks about. How can we be zocha to a HaKadosh Baruch Hu coming through for us with the redemption? It should be b'mheira. Lo yuchal adam b'dareinu lasos achas me'elef. We can't do even a little fraction of what the Gedolim did of previous generations. That was the question posed to Reb Chaim Vital. Reb Chaim Vital answers, you should know da'ata govra ma'od hasitra achra. Now, meaning at this point in history, this is already going back, Reb Chaim Vital was in the 1500s. The power of the sitra achra of the Yetzer Hara, of that force of Tumah in the world, is more powerful now than it ever was previously, and we could assume it only got more and more powerful through the centuries. V'hama'at she'osem ata Elokim choshva l'tova kaharbei shehayu osem harishonim. And any little bit we're able to do now, even though, in contrast to the Gedolim of generations prior, it's nothing. We're not giving the same Mesiras Nefesh, we're not learning the same vast breadth and depth of Torah, but the tension is so much stronger. The conflict, the fighting against the tide is so much more difficult because it's more powerful now, pushing us in the opposite direction away from Torah than it's ever been before in history. And therefore, said Reb Chaim Vital, and the Chida is quoting this as a source of chizuk, of encouragement, no matter how small we think we are, we should never feel that my contribution doesn't make a difference. Because it could be the small nisoyim, that little step forward, even though I've fallen so many times, but it could be that one moment of hisgavrus, of being able to overpower the Yetzer. It could be that one moment that changes everything in a way that Rabbi Akiva Eger wasn't able to do. You never know. One of the Talmidim of the Chida wrote a poem after he passed away in 1806. And at the end of the poem, the Talmud of Shmuel HaKohen, he says that the Chida's neshama was returned to its maker in purity with Kedusha. He left for us an incredible encyclopedic knowledge, not only of insights, of deep insights into Torah, both the revealed and the hidden Torah, but he also left for us incredible, invaluable insights into the history of who these Svarim, who were the authors of the Svarim, what was their intention. Basically, the entire gamut of Torah scholarship was pieced together through the Chida. And it wasn't just a historic exercise or something that was analytical. It was with leiv and nefesh that he poured in really his whole life. And therefore writes Reb Shmuel HaKohen, his neshamas returned to Hashem after leaving the world with so much treasure. Lifnei elyon toch efroyon tagil nafsho im harashbi. And not only is he reunited with HaKadosh Baruch Hu and with his wife and with the mishpacha and ancestors, he's rejoicing together with Reb Shimon Bar Yochai because he brought so much of the Rashbi's Torah down to this world. Yoshuv Dodi im ish sodi hu Elio Anovi, this incredible sacred man who was a mystery to most of us, is now together with the Rashbi, Elio Anovi. V'schuso yogen aleinu, he should be a meilit yosher for Klal Yisrael. Amen.